Kanwal, I want to talk about the D2C opportunity as well as the D2C challenge. And I know that this is something that you are very closely focused on. Again, all kinds of numbers about the size of the opportunity, whether it's a Bernstein report, which talks about the D2C market touching about $100 billion by 2025, or a KPMG study, which talks about India being home to more than 800 D2C brands as of 2021. You're invested in many of the companies that are in the news and the companies that are making headlines. What do you see as the key challenges in an environment where inflation is starting to impact discretionary spends, where funding is starting to slow down, and there is a certain degree of commoditization in the market at this point in time?
So I think clearly the choice and the proliferation of brands and the barrier to entry becoming so much lesser, especially on the e-marketplaces, is leading to this proliferation. And I would argue that, it's a very good, almost like a wake-up call for our industry or the D2C space to go back to the fundamentals. We always talked about brand values. I mean, Levers taught us that, the first thing you have to really focus on is what really is that value proposition? What are you offering the consumer? Why should they keep buying you again and again? Talk about unit economics. We talk about, the basic business model has to be healthy, and you cannot just keep buying sales at the cost of profitability for, perpetuity. So I think brands which understand the significance of these factors today are very well positioned because, like Manan said, we have amazing infrastructure. We have a very, very demanding and a consumer base across all these segments, which is looking for choices, which has never had that opportunity to consume across so many different categories. So the demand side, I think, is phenomenally active and very, very interesting for brands today. It is how you design your business model and how you think about the basics and the foundations right. I think that's where we need to focus on. And it's also incumbent on people like us who are helping these brands find their place under the sun to really deliver on some of these aspects. Because if you get caught up in this narrative of saying, let me grow at any cost and profitability will follow, I think that's a really recipe for disaster, if you ask me.
Kanwal, we did see a bunch of companies head to Dalal Street, and we've also seen what's happened to them post-listing. How confident do you feel about this story being bought into by investors in the public markets? I mean, we saw what happened with Nykaa, and that, in a sense, was a standout in comparison to what happened with the rest of the new listings. But how believable is this story going to be from a public market perspective?
So again, Shireen, the fundamental has to be what is the foundation of the business. You look at three IPOs that happened in the consumer space: Maneuver, Go Colors, and Campus. And all three of them were received very well. In fact, the last I checked, all three of them have actually grown beyond their listing price and doing extremely well on the bourses. So clearly, if you are creating value and if you are offering something which is of value and differentiation to the consumer, the markets are responding. Now, we believe that if a D2C brand has that foundation, which is strong, and has the right elements to build the business over a long period of time with the profitable business model, then that is exactly what the market is looking for. Because the reality is that there are not enough brands in India. And that is a legacy we have because of the complexity of distribution, etc. So today, there are very few brands which you can call as sustainable and with a headroom of growth. If you can deliver that value proposition to the consumer, I think the market will follow.
Kanwal, before I get Manan back into the conversation, one of the other trends that we have, of course, seen play out in the last few years is the large FMCG companies picking up either completely or a significant stake in some of these D2C brands, whether it's ITC or HUL, etc. Do you see that trend picking up momentum, given the fact that this is also a challenging period at this point in time?
Absolutely. 100%. So, what we, as an investor, what we normally try and see is there are two paths to exit for us and for the business. And obviously, the interest of the large strategics, whether it's multinationals or Indian companies, has been extremely high, because the realization is that everybody needs to play in this new age digital first ecosystem. But building a business from 0 to 100, much tougher for a large multinational or a large corporate than taking a 100, 200 crore company to 1,000 crores, because then their efficiencies of distribution, supply chain, quality, production, etc. come in. So it's a very natural opportunity for both, whether you see all the recent announcements that have happened, whether it was Marico, whether it was Wipro, whether it was recently Dabur, made an announcement a couple of days back. So we do see that, there is a very natural tendency from, and as you know, some of them are investors in our fund for the very same reason, that they want to be connected with the new age brand ecosystem.
Manan, I'll address this question to you and then come to Kanwal, but let me start by asking you, since you're talking about micro-segmentation in terms of markets, let's also talk about categories which are nascent at this point in time, which you believe are likely to grow further. Where are the opportunities, the sort of untapped potential?
Yep. Absolutely. I think the penetration headroom is massive across categories is the first thing I would say. And then which means even the mature categories also continue to have more penetration headroom when you compare it versus relatively mature markets such as US and China. But there are high frequency categories which are frequently bought by consumers which have not still taken off in as big a way, right? Like, so fashion is still 10% penetration in India. Grocery is sub 1% penetration in India. So in our view, mobiles, large appliances, electronics has contributed about 45 to 50% of the market up until 2022. The salience of this category is going to come down. And what we'll see is fashion, general merchandise, and grocery is going to together account for about 2/3 of the market come 2027.
Yeah, Kanwal, I want you to build on that. Whether it's mobile phones, beauty, cosmetics, fashion, these are categories which have built themselves out in India. Indian brands, digitally native, digitally first brands building themselves out. What excites you? You talked about how this is going to be a market where we see a combination of both products and services, the solutions take off. Interesting things where we're seeing companies like Boat, for example, make their presence felt in the consumer space, not in a solutions way, but in a product way. Where do you believe we're going to see the next wave of innovation, brand building?
Sure. So, one almost like a horizontal mega theme, which was also a big positive coming out of the COVID pandemic, was the focus on health and wellness. And I think what we have started seeing is across the board, across different customer segmentation, there is a growing desire and almost concern about what you consume in every form and fashion, whether it is what you put inside your body, what you put on your body, the kind of clothes you wear, the kind of house you live in. There is a growing. So I would say as a horizontal area, what is good for you, better for you, has been something that we have seen. And again, digital allows for that, because the narrative is built almost on a one-to-one basis with the consumer. So wellness as a space expanding into healthcare is something we are seeing as one big area of focus and priority for us. Second area that we feel is very, very interesting is the whole home space. Because while we have seen some amount of activity, the beauty and personal care and food and beverages, the home is also another space which is getting really disrupted. Whether it was work from home, whether it was the desire of the new generation to buy and home proud, as we call it. And therefore, how they design their homes in terms of what they put inside, whether it's decor, the way they cook, the way they actually live on a day-to-day basis, is really getting disrupted. So that's one, again, mega theme that we are seeing some very interesting ones. We are also seeing a lot of interesting opportunity in the pet space, Shireen. And again, it started again as a COVID phenomena where we saw a lot more adoption of pets, but that phenomena seems to be here to stay. And as we know, globally, the pet markets are massive. So we do see that that's another area that will emerge as a big opportunity. Lastly, I just want to mention one thing again, which we have been building on through some early work in the fund, is Indian brands for global markets. And we think that time has come when we start seeing some really large brands getting built for international markets with a lot of Indian sensibilities. And obviously, we have seen themes like Ayurveda, seen things like Indian spices, Indian handicrafts, etc. So that's another, trend that we are observing very closely and actually investing in the space quite actively.
Well, that's interesting. So wellness, healthcare, that of course continues to be an area where investors will put their money where their mouth is, people like Kanwal. The home space, the pet space, and of course taking Indian brands global, that is going to be something to watch out for. We haven't really seen that happen in a big way so far. We've made small steps, but perhaps we could be at an inflection point. I don't know. We're doing a show here on the sleep space and how that's going to be an exciting opportunity to look at on our show, Mad About Markets. Kanwal, is that something that you're willing to bet on?
Oh, we already have bet on it. So we have invested in a company called the Sleep Company. And I can tell you that is really a very exciting. And sleep tech, not just sleep. And how you can use technology to improve the quality of the sleep and the comfort that you have. And I think that's another breakthrough space which we are very excited about.
Okay, gentlemen, we could have continued this conversation to talk about more of the breakthrough ideas that we're seeing take off in the market, but we've run out of time this evening. We will have you back with us to talk more. But for today, Manan Bhasin, Kanwaljit Singh, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on this edition of Young Turks.